All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Broxton Digital Show. I'm your host, Broxton Davis. I'm also a performance media analyst at one of the top advertising agencies in the world, and you're here for another episode of my podcast, the Broxton Digital Show, which I bring on, some of the best marketers and advertisers out there doing it right now, killing it in their careers, and I'm asking them the questions to get as much value as possible for the next generation of marketers and advertisers. Whether it be you're a student trying to figure things out, you're in your first career trying to figure things out, or you're looking to make that move maybe to the second spot in your career. This is going to be the place where you come to get the insights from the people in the industry that have already done what you're doing and are answering the questions you probably have. Today, I'm joined by another awesome guest, another large agency executive. He has a pretty storied career in advertising, and I'm super excited to get into it and kind of, see how he broke in to ended up where he's at now. But he brings, a wealth of experience. Like I said, he actually has some Big Ten representation. He's an IU graduate, and now serves as the Chief Strategy Officer for Publicis Media. Ladies and gentlemen, Avin Narasimhan.
Thank you, Broxton. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much
Excited
for
to be part of the show.
definitely. Thanks so much for carving some time out to hop on the show. I know you've been busy lately.
Of course.
So to get started, I usually just kind of like to start with, obviously, people breaking in right now compared to when you broke into advertising back when you did that. It's a lot different nowadays, but I still, love to hear kind of how you broke into advertising, and try to think of the spots along the way where you might have learned the most, or maybe you thought you knew something and had something figured out, but come to find out later in the career, you kind of figured out it was a little bit different. Would just love to kind of hear, your experience there and how you really broke into the advertising industry.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll give you the I'll give you the backstory, somewhat abridged, but hopefully interesting and useful for the audience. So marketing has kind of been all around me for better or worse since I was a kid. My dad is a marketing professor, just recently retired. My uncle in India, who I'm very close with, legendary creative director, ran Leo Burnett, among others. So it's been, I don't know, it's like corny, cheesy, say in the bloodline, but it was around me for most of my life. Not surprisingly, I went to, as you mentioned, went to Indiana, went to Kelly School, undergrad, did undergrad business school, majored in marketing, saw the path that I thought I was on, thought, advertising was one of many options, but marketing was always something that had a hold of me, piqued my interest, and I knew I wanted to be in it. In terms of how I started getting into advertising, one of my most formative professors, speaking of Indiana, Ann Bastianelli, who I'm still very close with, was my first true advertising professor my senior year and just blew me away. Speaking of one of those really formative individuals who left such a lasting impression between her background as an agency executive, who then went client side, and then ultimately went to teach the next generation everything that she knew. Just a sheer force of personality and taught me lessons that I still connect back to today, still reference all these years later. And I bring her up because she was one of the first people who, when I was in her class, kind of pointed me towards the advertising agency world and said, "Hey, based on everything I've seen this semester, I think this could be a great fit for you and something that you should really consider as you take those next steps into your career." Now, given where I was in undergrad business school, it was advertising was one of the places I wanted to go, but I was also surrounded by an incredible program, Great Career Services, and I mentioned my father, a professor, somewhat conservative influences, conservative in terms of risk taking, not politics, but he advised me to kind of keep my options open, look at the big companies, look at big corporations. They have better training programs, more structure, more this, more that. So I ended up taking a position at Marshall Fields, which eventually became Macy's, in their merchandising department through their analyst training program. All sounded great. I had a job before the beginning of my second semester senior year. Sounded great on paper. Paycheck seemed nice. Moved up to Minneapolis, did all that. Seemed like a proper big boy adult thing to do. I got up there and I hated it. Hated the job, hated the company, hated everything about it. Didn't feel like I was using any of the skills that I just spent 4 years building. Staring at systems that were built in the 1970s were not really met for modern times. And really just wasn't finding the fulfillment that I thought I would. Part of that was youthful arrogance. I had spent 4 years in a really good business school being told that I was going to run the world at 22. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I just knew that something was a little bit off. And I bring it up because I think it's important for your audience to hear too. Sometimes you learn as much from your stumbles as you do from your success. So I was here, had an apartment, rent, all these kinds of things, but I just knew that this was not the place that I wanted to be. So, against the advice of everybody, my father, my uncle, all of these formative influences, I quit. I quit without a job. Didn't really know where I was going to go, but I knew that this experience pushed me towards the advertising agency world. I knew I wanted to break into it. Um, and Broxton, this was, just to give you a little bit of a sense of how old I actually am. This was pre-LinkedIn. Facebook was still a college network. Twitter didn't exist. So to get into these environments, it was literally pounding the pavement, printing off a resume, going door to door, going to agencies, sending cold emails, just trying to get a response from anybody. And I spent a few months kind of just flailing around. I knew what I wanted to go for, but I wasn't sure that I was going to get it, and it was a little bit of an uncertain time. But I bring this up because I was lucky enough to have somebody who took a chance on me. Dodie Subler, who was a high-level executive at Fallon back in the day, went off and started a brand consultancy. Sent her a cold email with a resume. I think I wrote like a rap song trying to stand out and make my experience seem interesting. And she somehow saw something in me, brought me in to talk, and said, don't typically hire people right out of college, but I want to introduce you to some people at Fallon because I think there's potential here. I think you'd really like them. So she took a chance on me, met with people at Fallon. Luckily, I was able to get my foot in the door there. I actually started off on the account management side on the creative agency. Wasn't I knew I wanted to get into strategy, or at least I thought I did at 23. You don't really know much of what you don't know, but account management was a great starting point for me because it gave me a sense of how does the agency world actually work? What do all these different disciplines do? What does it take to actually get a campaign out of the door? How do you deal with clients and all the conversations that go around it? Spent about a year in that discipline, kind of learning the fundamentals, and then made my way over to strategy by working a lot with the strategy department, the head of strategy, a lot of mentors that I met there, and I'm still close with today, to get my start in strategy and start to really understand what that meant. How do you apply it? What does it look like on pieces of business as well as pitching new business? So I was at Fallon for about 2 years in total. That was my first, real agency experience. Then was recruited over to Modernista, which was a really iconic independent agency in Boston back in the day. Met some of the most brilliant people that I've ever worked with, and it was a bit of, if anybody listening is kind of weighing their different options between, do I go to the big holding company? Do I go to the independent shops? There's a lot to love about both of those. What I loved about the independent agency world was the lack of structure and the lack of sort of people. Quite frankly, it's small organizations. You've got to run fast. Is you get to do a lot of different things quickly. So I was a strategist in title, but I was part account manager, part creative. There were many late nights where I was mocking up comps with my art director friends and writing lines of copy because we just needed to get stuff done and get into a pitch and go win it. But an incredible experience. I was there for about 2 years, still very close with many of the people that I met. But that was a place that was for all the good things about independent hot shops. It was run by a couple of creative directors and didn't necessarily have the strongest business sense. So when a big client walked out of the door, that was kind of the end of that agency. So I went to Arnold for another couple of years while I was in Boston, and then eventually made my way over to RGA and made the move to New York, which was kind of one of the defining moments professionally for me. Now, I was at RGA back in about 2012, 2014, when that agency was kind of could do no wrong. They couldn't miss. Everything was a Grand Prix, a titanium lion. It was an incredible place to be a part of. But the real pivot point for me was not being at that agency, but it was the people that I met at our partner agency. So I was there running digital strategy on MasterCard back in the day, and this was part of a cross agency team. McCann was a brand agency. was the media agency, RJ was a digital agency. And the people that I met as part of the leadership around that group were some of the most incredible people I've ever worked with. We all became really good friends. And that was my first real introduction to the media side of the house in a way that felt like a place where I wanted to be. And for anybody who may be listening or watching, I think I was definitely influenced by some creative agency stereotypes about the media side of the house. It's oftentimes, even to this day, sometimes seen as it's just, a bunch of nerds doing a lot of math. There's not a lot of creativity, all things that you know not to be true, Braxton. But at the time, I kind of bought into it and said, if I really want to do strategy, if I want to be creative, I need to be in a creative media and creative agency. When I met my media agency counterparts from UM, I was blown away. That was the first time I saw this is what strategy at a great media agency could look like. This is what strategists, this is how smart they can be. I've completely misjudged everything here. So fast forward a couple of years of working together, doing a lot of great work together. The leadership team from both McCann as well as UM went over to become CEO, CSO, and a new leadership team at PhD, media agency at Omnicom. They called me and asked me to come over and help rebuild their comms planning department. And at the time, I didn't know anything about media. I did not know what a TRP or a GRP was or anything. So I said to Nathan Brown, who was coming in as a CEO, I said, look, I love working with you, but I'm not totally sure what you want me for, to be honest. And he said something that was so simple, and the clarity of the mission was so exciting. He said, I want to make this place the most creative media agency in the country. And I said, that is something I can get on board with. I know a little bit about creativity. I know that I want to work with you. And going to PhD, it wasn't because I was dying to work in media. It wasn't because I was dying to go to PhD. It was because the people that I believed in and who believed in me for whatever reason wanted me to be there. I didn't know that I'd end up being there 7 years, didn't know that I'd become CSO of the agency, but going to that side of the house ended up being the best professional decision I'd ever made, because had I gone from RGA to another creative agency, I would have gotten a little bit better at being a creative strategist, 5, 10% better, whatever it might be. But going to the other side of the house allowed me to build up an entirely new set of mental muscles, new skills to really learn and understand the language of media and creative. Even if I didn't realize at the time, that became one of the biggest advantages that would do well for me, as I move through the rest of my career. So PhD was 7 years there, the most formative experience, taught me everything I know about being a leader, about being a great teammate, about understanding how media and creative really work together. Towards the end of that, I think like everybody, after living through COVID and the pandemic, we're all having existential crisis. So I was like, do I really want to stay here? Should I do something else? Do I even want to be in advertising anymore? I still did. But I wanted to go and kind of scratch the creative itch again. So after I left PhD, I went to be chief strategy officer at Hill Holiday, an iconic media agency or iconic creative agency in Boston, came up with America Runs on Duncan for Duncan, among others. Was there for just about 2 years, then was recruited by my CEO from PhD, who had gone to McCann. He had just been there for about a year, called me up and said, hey, I know you're doing good at Hill Holiday, but we're doing something really interesting here, which is trying to build up a new audience and connections planning capability on the creative side of the house. And given your background, we want to see if this can actually work, if it's something that clients actually want. Doesn't feel duplicative of what they get from a media agency, but is really in service of creating modern creative that drives business results. So I was there for about 2 years, and we had a lot of incredible success. We were winning pitches. I built up their audience capability from scratch, built up a new connections planning group. Then the acquisition happened between Omnicom and IPG. And had that not happened, I might still be there. I'm not sure, because we were doing quite well. But around that time, given the kind of role that I was in, I had kind of my spidey senses were tingling, and I said, let me just look around and see what else might be out there in case things don't go so well with this acquisition. So I called up. Luckily, I knew a lot of people who were at Publicis from my Omnicom days, Scott Agador and Lauren Grossman, among others. And as we started talking about opportunities at Publicis, it ended up kind of being a really nice full circle moment, because the opportunity here was about not just building capabilities at the center, which is what I was doing when I was at McCann, creating a new discipline, new capabilities, and rolling them out, but pairing that with accountability over an agency and over a department, being CSO for the first year I was here, over collective. So anything that we built centrally in terms of how do we leverage all the data and infrastructure that Scott Hagedorn and team have built up here at Publicis, apply that to what modern strategy and planning can look like, and then deploy it on clients like Stellantis or like Coke or like Pfizer, so that when we go to roll those out more broadly across Publicis media and creative agencies, it's not a theoretical exercise like, hey, these people in the center came up with a new thing and now it's your problem to go figure it out. It was, we came up with a thing, we pressure tested it on Stellantis. Here's how it worked. Here's how you could scale it up and down for your client, which may be bigger or smaller. And here's how the different use cases of what this could look like might actually apply to a client and the questions they might ask. So it was a bulletproof and pressure tested way of thinking about capability building, while also having the accountability to an agency, to a team, to a department, to the bottom line and health of the agency business. So that I've been here, I think, actually, as of this recording, just about a year at Publicis. It's my first time outside of being at Fallon when I was 22. When holding companies don't really mean a whole lot. It's just something up in the ether. But this is the first time I've been part of Publicis, and I think all the bets they've made, whether it's investing in AI earlier than most, creating a layer of kind of capability that is truly well funded and sourced and actually empowered to help all of our different agencies. It's been a good move, and it's been exciting to meet folks like you, the talent we have here, and I think anybody looking for their first step or their first opportunity. I think this is a place where we can help people grow, help you shine, and I'm looking forward to the rest of my time here. So
Yeah,
hopefully it
definitely.
wasn't too
No,
long-winded.
no, that was all. I mean, such a long career. You kind of have to go through all of it, right? And I totally agree with you. I think Publicis is definitely one of the top agencies to start your career at right now, and they're just, really making the right moves as far as how they treat their people and what they're enabling them with as far as tools, education, that kind of thing. I've definitely been pretty blown away myself compared to some other people that are at other agencies that I know, that have, kind of had the same experience as far as when they got into the industry and everything. But I mean, wow, what a crazy career to kind of go from, getting that initial job and finding out you didn't like it to, really deciding, hey, I'm going to quit this to now end up where you're at. I'm sure, when you quit that job, you had a lot of people saying, man, like that might be the end of Avin. He probably might go on and do something not so crazy now. He blew his
Yeah.
opportunity, but took it and turned it into something so awesome. Now, one big point I want to make is like, a lot of people who listen to the show are students who, are about to graduate with their degree or maybe just graduated this past May with their degree. And you
Hmm.
can kind of have that feeling of like, how do I break in? It's a crazy industry. And, I'm just shooting all these LinkedIn messages and cold emails and job applications and hearing nothing, kind of similar, but in my opinion, a little bit easier than your experience of, cold calling, knocking on doors, showing up to people's places with your resumes. I would love to hear though, like what would you have to say to the student or maybe, fresh grad that is just feels like they got no momentum going for them right now? What would you kind of recommend to them to, help move the needle on, breaking in and getting that first role?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I actually went back to my alma mater, Indiana, and spoke to some just about to be grads at Kelly last fall. And one of the things that I said to them to empathize is, I realize it's a weird time right now. You've got headlines telling you white collar jobs are going to be automated. Do we need entry level roles? Can AI do this? Can it do that? That all does seem scary and it seems unique, and it is in many ways. But if you rewind to when I graduated, a year later, the Great Recession hit. The economy completely bottomed out. No jobs were there. Nobody was taking calls. It was tenuous. We were all hanging on by a string. And if you believe it or not, it was actually scarier than what we're seeing right now because clients were terrified. They couldn't invest. There was no money to be found because it was quite literally bottoming out. The confidence that I think we can have now is for all the doom and gloom in the headlines, for all the hype bubbles that are being inflated. I've yet to hear a single client say, there's too many humans on that staff plan. There's too many young people. I don't know what's going on. We need more agents. What they still need and what they still want is taste, is judgment, is human creativity. And what I would say, and what I said to a lot of those students is, what keeps this industry moving is not just people like me, it is fresh perspectives, it is fresh eyes, it is fresh thinking, because the main reason that clients hire an agency in the first place is to see things that they can't see. It's not that we are superhumans or capable of doing things they can't, but outside perspective is what they really need because they are within their own organization, they are deep within their own brand. They only see what they see. And by bringing them external perspectives, by bringing them a point of view, by bringing them curiosity, by bringing them pushing on assumptions, that is where we create our value. That is how we help drive their business. And for me, I know what I'm doing and I can get into that rhythm and I know how to win a pitch. I know how to keep a client happy. But that's not the only job. The job is to push them. The job is to get them to think about things differently, to get them to see things, to look around corners in a new way. And we need young people coming into this industry to give us those new perspectives, to look at things that I might have been doing for the last 10 years and say, hey, why does it need to be like that? Why couldn't we do it like this? Why couldn't we turn that problem this way? Why couldn't we look at it through the lens the other way? So those challenges, those pushes from young people with the bravery and the conviction to have a point of view and to challenge people like me is what I'm really looking for when I go to bring new people in this industry is be fearless, be brave, come at me with your ideas, with your perspective, because that is why you're here. That's what you need. And so, for all of the things that might seem a little bit weird and uncomfortable right now, we, people who are in positions to bring young people in who need fresh talent, we are still looking for your perspective. We're looking for you to make us better, and we are bullish on bringing people in to pair with technology. But people need to have that point of view, that taste, and that judgment, because we know that the impact that can have on our clients, on their business, and on outcomes that matter to them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is such a great perspective. And I think for a lot of students and young professionals, a lot of that is like a mindset shift, right? Of like,
Mhm.
this person isn't too important to talk to me, or, isn't looking down on me because I'm half their age. Just kind of like you said, a lot of times it's
Yeah.
like, bring some new ideas to the table. Tell me what I don't know about technology and, help me, move what I'm trying to do forward. At least that's been my experience so far. But I
Yeah.
definitely had that nervousness too at the beginning, earlier in my career, even as a student, like, who am I to kind of reach out to these people and, cold DM them on LinkedIn. But next thing you
Hmm.
know, you're having hour-long conversations like this. Would you recommend though, seeing you see a good amount of hiring and everything, and the job market is pretty crazy right now as far as just, not a ton of open positions to apply to, and then, a lot of them are hyper competitive, especially at the entry level. Other than just firing out those applications and spending a lot of time on that, would you have any actionable advice that you would recommend to those recent grads to go out and do, outside of maybe just doing those applications?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that I would suggest. One, LinkedIn can be a little bit of a sort of navel-gazing cesspool, but the reality is when we talk about people hiring people for a point of view, what is your perspective? What do you think? The amount that you can either write or have a perspective on what brands are doing, get your thoughts out there. Make sure that you're sharing your perspective because when you compare all things being equal, somebody coming from the same school, same degree, same hard skills, what really is the difference maker when we're looking at hiring young people is does this person have a point of view that is fundamentally different and interesting and would be additive to the culture we're trying to build? If everybody else turns the problem to the left, do you turn it to the right? And how could that add and bring a different perspective to us? So put your thoughts out there, whether it's on Twitter, on LinkedIn, wherever it is. Write long form, write short form, but having a perspective and a point of view to put out there is one of the ways in which I still find people that pop up in my feed or they're sharing something interesting, a perspective on something that I may not have thought of. So put your thoughts out there because that's what we're all looking for. To your point, second, reaching out to people. This is the best part of my day right now. What we're doing right now, all the meetings that we're in, all the difficult client conversations, all those things. I am very aware, and I hope I never forget how much people helped me along the way. None of us succeed on our own merits. We like to think we do. We like to think it's a meritocracy, but somebody reached out a hand along the way to help us step up, to help us step into the next thing, and any of us in those positions. And I hope you're hearing this from everybody that you're talking to on the show is this is the thing that we love more than anything else. If I can even in a little way help somebody who's trying to break in, help them get to that next opportunity, help them grow, that is the most fulfilling thing more than any award, more than winning a can. All of that stuff, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as really feeling like we made a difference. We helped people achieve what they want next. So put your thoughts out there and your perspective. Reach out to people. They're more willing to talk to you than you might realize. And this is a hard thing for me as somebody who's pretty introverted, but go to the networking events, get out there in person, go to the industry conferences. Most of them will always have student discounted rates. If you can, get to those places, meet with people. Think of it as collecting data points. All of these conversations are data points for you as you're starting to formulate your journey and what you might want to do. So if you think about the example of me, thinking I really want to get into strategy, I want to be in the advertising agency world, meeting with one person could open your eyes to something totally different. You might think that your strategy is the way you want to go. And then you meet a creative director who completely opens your eyes up to a new world or a new perspective. Or you meet somebody who's in a client leadership position and you think, actually, that might be the place that I want to go. So putting your thoughts out there, reaching out to people, going to things in person, because more so than you know it, even if it doesn't always seem like it, no matter how busy people are, we're excited to meet that next generation of talent because we know it's not just altruistic. Obviously we want to make sure that we're helping and just like people helped us, but we know how essential your perspective is. We know how much you all can help us drive our clients' business, help us make them successful in ways that we can't do on our own. So those would be my pieces of get your thoughts out there, meet people, reach out, and take all those conversations with an open mind because you never know where they're going to lead you, even if you have a thought of where you do want to go.
Yeah, I mean, that is some great advice. And I will say, as somebody who now is trying to maximize doing all three of those things, I really wish I would have got out more on the ball of that. Like my senior year, I know like I'd probably be so much further ahead, even just as far as the size of my network and the people I know, as far as the next like opportunities and everything, would just be that much larger if I would have started earlier. So I totally recommend anybody who's taking that advice to get on it as soon as possible because that's such great advice. Um, One thing I want to talk about too is, you kind of talked about those later opportunities in your career where, a lot of the times you were just getting a phone call and that phone call was, "Hey, Avin, I need you to come help me build this." Or, "Here's this crazy unique situation. I think you'd be the perfect person to bring your creative and strategic touch to this." And that doesn't just happen, it's not just you stayed there long enough, made your name by staying there, and now you're getting all these crazy opportunities. Those are far few and in between the people who are getting,
Mhm.
those calls like that and who are thought of like that by, people who might be above them. I'm curious to know what would you recommend to maybe the young professionals who are more, just getting into their career, maybe 1 to 2 years in. How do you start to foster those relationships and, build that almost personal brand for yourself to where, later down the line you're getting those phone calls?
Yeah, yeah. So a couple things. I would say going back to the example of when I went to PhD, not knowing anything about media. I Not that it was a mistake, but I'd spent most of my career up until then chasing probably the things that I shouldn't have been chasing. Like I wanted to work at a particular agency or I wanted to work on a particular client. I went to RGA not because because I wanted to work at RGA. I just knew by reputation, by name, I was like, I want that on my resume. And that wasn't a mistake, but the biggest benefit of going there was the people that I met that I ended up going to work with at PhD. So I discovered a late lesson probably a little bit later than I should have, and it's so obvious. The name on the door, the clients, the categories, none of those things really matter. You'll get the experience. Go to the people who believe in you and who you believe in. The people who are going to give you that chance to fail, pick you back up, teach you why you failed and how you can succeed the next time. That's what I found at PhD, quite honestly, for the first time. People who are willing to give me the rope, the opportunity, let me fall down, pick me back up, and show me here's how we can do that next time. So those relationships, following the people that you know and who believe in you, when you find those people, hang on to them. I'll give you another example. My first new business captain when I was at Fallon hired me again 3 years later when I was at Modernista, and then he was a CEO at Hill Holiday, hired me 15 years later when we worked together. Three different agencies spanning over almost 20 years. But it was because we maintained those connections, both as friends, as coworkers, and we never let those things go. And that was a big part on me was they could have easily drifted off. We could have lost touch, but I knew that those were people that I believed in and I wanted to work with again at some point, in some form, in some fashion. And I'm glad that I did because those things, to your point, opened up opportunities that I may not have gotten to otherwise. So, related to that point, and I don't want to sound like, an old man yelling at the clouds here, but I have noticed, especially in the last few years, that things that we once took for granted, like when you quit a job, you give proper notice, you do things responsibly, you make sure that you're leaving on a good note. I've seen people walk out of the door, the day they give notice, or not kind of do a handoff in the right ways. And I get it, because on the other side, the company's not going to show you any loyalty. If business is going bad, we see it every day in the headlines 10,000 layoffs, this amount of layoffs, that amount of layoffs. So when you're not feeling loyalty, I get why there's no desire to show loyalty. But when you burn bridges, especially in a small industry like this, that lasts. And if somebody, even if that was 20 years ago and you were 22 years old, yeah, you can write it off to youthful mistakes and all those kinds of things. But if it's between you and somebody who didn't burn that bridge, who did things responsibly, who made sure the team was taken care of, who made sure that they left and made sure that people missed them on the way out the door versus thinking like, thank God that person's gone. Those are the things that make you last in people's minds because 10 years later, when that opportunity comes up and they say, oh, I wonder what he or she is up to now. I remember them as, a kid running around at 22, but maybe there's somebody who I could bring in as a leader now. If they still have that bad taste in their mouth from that experience, you can believe that's going to come back. So again, I don't want to sound like the old guy here, but relationships matter. The way that you make your exit when you do, because we all do. We all move around in this industry. We jump for opportunity. We jump for money. We jump for titles, whatever it might be. But preserve the connections you have. And no matter how big or small, no matter how important or quote unquote not a person might be at that given moment in time, you never know when that person might be a CEO 20 years from now. You never know when that person might be a client 10 years from now. So you will, whether you believe it or not, you're going to run into those people again. And do you want them to have a good impression of you or something else?
Yeah, no, that is definitely some great advice. And I'm so glad you brought up the whole like bouncing around in the advertising industry and kind of how it can be a scary thing. Because that's definitely something like I've stressed about early on in my career and even in college as you kind of start to meet some professionals and see like, man, you're moving around quite a bit. Maybe, some people every 1 to 2 years are you moving up and moving around. But I think that's some great advice of just, if you handle it the right way and you go about how, things have been done respectfully for so many years and ways to not burn bridges, just really seems to be the remedy to that because it is kind of inevitable. If you don't move around, you're probably going to miss out on some opportunities, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think even when I first started out here, and I brought up the example of my dad, like there was a time when if you left a job in under a year or even under 2 years, it was seen as some kind of blemish on your resume. Oh, that person's a job hopper. They can't stick. They can't commit. But the truth is that that day is gone. And yes, you're going to come across some people who will take it as an affront if you were to leave their team or their organization. My perspective on philosophy, one of the best things that I ever heard from my first boss at PhD was if you tell me that you're leaving for a better opportunity, I see that as I did my job at least reasonably well because what you learned here prepared you for that next thing. If I can say I helped that person get to something even better, I'll be the first one to give you a hug on the way out. And if you want to come back, I'll welcome you back with a hug. And I've always taken that lesson to heart that if somebody decides to leave for something better, if it's somebody I care about, I'll make sure. I was like, I hope you're not just leaving to leave. I want you to go on to something better. Nothing can make me not that it makes me happy when people leave, but that is a good thing. It is a good thing for their growth. It's a good thing for opportunities, and it signals that they felt confident enough in what they learned and how they grow while they're in the time they were with you to go stretch for that next thing, to take on something bigger, to take on something more difficult. So I would say if you're still hearing that, yeah, obviously you shouldn't leave a job every 6 months. There's some common sense to this, but especially early on, make sure that you're keeping your eyes open. Always take the phone call. There's never going to be any harm that even if you're happy in a role or happy at a company, when somebody reaches out with something interesting, take the call. Make sure that you're keeping those connections. Back to the point of how do you build the relationships? How do you build the connections? You never know if that person who reached out, even when you were happy and things are flying high, if you took that call, then they remember you 2 years from now when it's like, oh, maybe that wasn't the right time, but maybe now is the right time. And it could be the perfect match and the perfect solution when that time is right. So take the calls, always meet people, always hear what folks have to say, but also make sure that you're taking care of yourself and looking out for your career and your growth. Now, said all that, there comes a time when, as you move up and you become more senior, look for that moment when you can really create lasting impact. And for me, that was a PhD, right? Before that, to your point, I'd had like 1.5 years, 2 years at a bunch of different agencies, all of which I was really happy about. And I think they've helped my resume along the way. But that 7 years at PhD was a very cementing moment of leadership and telegraphing that this person actually knows when the thing is right, knows to stay, knows how to grow, knows how to build an organization, build a team, build relationships, and actually last. So, for all the hopping that I might have done earlier, those 7 years and going from a director up to CSO was a real pivotal point in my career. So, get everything that you need to in those early days. I would say in your 20s, don't hesitate about hopping around, moving for opportunity. But as you start to get into those kind of director and more senior roles, look for the place that you want to stay. Look for the people who you want to stay with, the people who you believe in, the people who believe in you, and try to make something that is lasting and enduring in terms of your impact.
Yeah, no, that is some great advice, and I think just really hammers home why, like, that's literally why everybody says, don't burn a bridge, and relationships are so important because it's so true. You hear it a lot in college, and definitely even in like the Detroit advertising scene, like, oh, it's a small industry, and you don't really maybe think about it, especially early in your career. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's what somebody who's been here for 40 years is gonna say. But sitting here talking to somebody who sits in New York as a chief strategy officer, say the exact same thing that it's a small industry and not to burn a bridge, it just goes to show that like that is
Yeah.
just the state of the industry and just some really great advice for anybody starting out. Even if somebody wrongs you, might as well just kind of eat the bullet and, roll with the punches and move forward with your career rather than, burn a bridge that might kill an opportunity later on. But that was great kind of hearing, how you were able to just build such an awesome career, really, with the foundation of it being networking, relationships, putting yourself out there. Now I kind of want to switch lanes and talk about, what you're more well known for, and that's strategy. Strategy in college, you learn about it, and it's this big, broad net of all this different stuff happening in advertising, and pretty hard to get a full grasp on, what does working in strategy look like, and getting into the agency world, especially if you go work at a large agency, it can become even more confusing. There's different strategies for different clients, so many different moving parts and different pieces of different teams. I would love for you to just kind of one for the students who are thinking, I love strategy, getting, strategical and thinking about media campaigns and that kind of thing is, really my thing. How would you kind of demystify the whole strategy sector of advertising? And what are maybe some things you could start doing as a student or young professional that's job searching to, upskill in that area?
Yeah. So I think the thing that drew me in, and I had an internship in strategy when I was in college, and what stuck with me and what still sticks with me 20 plus years later is strategy is the function within an agency that allows you to effectively be a lifelong student, meaning your job is to process a vast amount of what's happening in the world, understanding what's happening in culture, what's happening in a client's category with their business, to always study and keep everybody else up on the forefront of what's going on, what do we need to know, what does all that mean for our client. And that was something that as somebody who in a different life, I might be a professor, had I actually listened to my dad and followed in his footsteps, being a student, being almost feeling like you're always learning, it's your job to be learning constantly, is at the core of what a great strategist is. The curiosity, the drive to always understand why is something like that? Why couldn't it be like this? Why couldn't we turn it the other way? That to me is when I look for young strategists now. I can teach you how to write a better deck. I can teach you how to use tools. I can teach you how to do X, Y, and Z. What I can't teach you is innate and natural curiosity. You're either a curious person who wants to know more about the world, or you don't. And kind of fueling and hanging on to that curiosity is one of the things that is so powerful and compelling about strategy. I often use the stat that as a parent, there's a great study from Harvard a few years ago where the average number of questions per day around 3 years old is somewhere in the range of 3 to 400. And I remember those days when my kids were young because it's nonstop. By age 6, the number of questions drops to 6 to 8 because kids, through school, through everything else, they stop asking why. They stop asking, why does it have to be like that? Why couldn't it be like this? And one of the things that I always say to students, that I say to my own kids, is never stop acting like you're three. Never stop questioning. Never stop asking why, because that is what makes, at the heart of it, a great strategist. Always asking powerful questions, always asking, why does it need to be like that? Why couldn't it be like this? So, first and foremost, that natural curiosity that you have as a student, as a young person, hold on to that. Don't let anybody push that out of you. Don't let that get beaten down. Don't sort of fall into formation and say, well, I'm not supposed to ask why. Always ask why, because that is the distinction between great talent and good. So that's kind of the first thing I would say is, especially in a world where you're going to come out of college with the same degrees, the same hard skills, that perspective and curiosity is the intangible thing that we're looking for and that we can nurture and build all the hard skills around. The other things that I would say about strategy, one, curiosity and the desire to learn. The other thing that always drew me into it and that keeps me excited about it is being the person that needs to have conviction and a point of view. Everybody in an agency world, as you're, I'm sure, starting to see, Broxton, you're going to have lots of people saying, why we can't do this, or why this wouldn't work for a client, or we've tried this 9 different ways and this is why it won't work. A strategist's job is to say, you know what, we don't have all the evidence in the world, we don't have all the proof in the world, but I believe, I have the conviction and the bravery to say, I know where we need to get to, and this is how I think we're going to go there. This is the bridge that we need to build. Because essentially, strategy is building a bridge from where you are now to where you need to go as a client. And what does it take to get across that bridge? And if you can be the person that has that conviction, because it is scary. It is scary to be 25 in a room of people more senior than you and say, actually, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. And here's why I think so. Because sometimes you're going to fail. I failed a lot. There were many times where I was that person and I was wrong. but I learned from those mistakes. I learned from that failure, and it made me a better strategist. It made me a better teammate. It made me a better leader over time. So the curiosity to look at something different, the conviction and the bravery to kind of say, I'm going to be the person that's shining a spotlight on myself and saying, I may not know exactly how to get there, but I believe this is where we need to go. Those are the things, if those resonate with you as you're listening to this, if you feel like that's something that, yeah, maybe a little bit scary, but also exciting and something where you think you could thrive, that's what's kept me excited about strategy all these years later, why I still do it, why I haven't gone client side at least yet. So those are the things that really, as a strategist, that now I'm looking for in that next generation of who is bringing to the table that curiosity, that conviction, that bravery to have a point of view, who could be, the next head of strategy or the next CSO or whatever it might be. Because that's an exciting journey to kind of see that talent come up and find, because there's not really, it's not like you took a class called Strategy 101. Maybe you did, but that's not really what you're going to do once you get into the world. It is an amorphous, to your point, a very vague and all-encompassing discipline, but that ability, those are the things that I really look for. And when I talk to young people, so those are the things that, really cultivate as you're looking to your next steps in your career.
Yeah, I mean that really demystifies the whole thing, just the way you were able to kind of set that up because like you said, there's a million different areas you can find yourself in strategy, but really honing in on those two things are going to be able to help you really move the needle at wherever you're at in that area of advertising. So that's super cool and I think if that's something that does resonate with you, definitely go after it. I think, the time is definitely now to get into the area of advertising that you want to if especially if you're passionate about it. And I'm glad you brought up the point about when you are that person who's brave and bringing the ideas to the table and maybe pushing back on some certain ideas from senior leadership, sometimes you're just going to be wrong, and that's kind of the scary side
Hmm.
of it. Is you could totally just what you said could be not right, and you kind of just got to eat it. But the other great point you made was that those were the moments where you learned the most. So I think it's kind of a dual-edged sword. You take a little bit more risk, you have a little bit more riding on what you're saying, but then, at the same time, even if you are wrong, you're probably going to have somebody who is, a genius in that field or a couple levels above you, teach you how you should do it to get it right. And, you're walking away with a benefit for yourself anyways. So just some great advice. Now I kind of want to talk about, we've talked about strategy and, you've built your career off that. Now I want to get into, a little bit more of what you're doing recently and just kind of, your thoughts on the current state of the industry where we're at right now. I know I want to start off with the reason, we're kind of able to sit down and record this is because this is the week during the Cannes Lions Creative Festival, and this was a year where you didn't go. Now, I know as a student, a lot of MSU students actually get the opportunity to go as seniors. They do a cool
Hmm.
little trip at Michigan State. I haven't got the opportunity to go, and I know it's high on the bucket list for a lot of young professionals getting into advertising. What would you say, something like that, is the value really there? Is that something, young professionals should be targeting, big conferences, big events like that? And kind of, what was maybe some of the most valuable takeaways you've had in your previous years of going?
Yeah, so one, yeah, I think it's really popular to hate on Can, to hate, and there is, there's a lot of cringe that comes on LinkedIn or on Instagram, everywhere else. It's lots of rosés, lots of beach, all that, and it's a lot of very senior, pricey people who get to do it. But if you set all that aside, I think particularly in this moment, let's just stay on the topic of Can. It's not hyperbole to say like this is a transformative moment for the industry. And I've been doing this long enough where I've seen all the transformations over time. Like everybody said the same thing about social media, same thing. Every new technological revolution that happens 5 years ago was what's our TikTok strategy? It's like, well, the strategist's job is still to say, what are we trying to achieve and how do we leverage new technology to get there? So in this moment where it feels like everything is changing, what is really powerful about things like that, about this industry, is it is young people who will help us shape what the next chapter looks like. Because we are throwing out a lot of the old assumptions, a lot of the ways that things were done, not just 10 years ago, not just 5 years ago, even a year ago. It's sometimes hard to remember that ChatGPT didn't exist as a consumer facing platform 3 years ago. That's how rapidly everything has changed. And that now seems like antiquated and old news, given how much has happened since then. So I think for young people now, what is really exciting to me about the moment we're in, and it's not to say that it won't come with challenges and it won't come with disruptions, but as AI continues to get better at pattern recognition, as it continues to do a lot of the things that used to take up a week's worth of time, 2 weeks worth of time of a young person, Now that we don't have to focus all of you on that, the opportunity is getting really supercharging human creativity, human strategic insight, focusing on higher level things that our clients really need now that you don't have to focus on all the grunt work. So what can still is to me, and what makes it essential is human creativity and judgment will always be the thing that unlocks game changing ideas, business driving solutions for our clients. Yes, we can get there faster. Yes, there are going to be jobs that are automated. Yes, there are going to be things that humans no longer have to spend time doing. But the difference makers of taste, of creativity, at least for now, that's not something that anything will be taken from humans, from humanity. So a celebration of human creativity, a celebration of human ingenuity, for all of its cringe, for all the things that you might criticize about it, is still important. It is still essential, and it is still where you meet back to relationships and the people who matter. That's where you get the chance to meet people who you admire, people who you may admire tomorrow, people who may have that opportunity that you didn't even know about, or people who may see in you as something that they never even knew that they needed, but you are now the person that's on their list and they want to bring you into their organization. So those are the moments there, and there aren't that many of them now. Obviously, conferences have proliferated and there's a lot of junk out there, but can Effie's, Jay Chiat, there are a few moments where this industry comes together to truly focus on the value of humans, the value of creativity, the value of ideas. So that was a very long-winded way of saying I think can still matters a lot, especially in this moment where there's so much conversation around what is the role of humans, what is the role of machines, how do these two things come together? And creativity to me is still what our clients are craving. It's what they need. It's what accelerates their business, not just automation and process and systems.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you kind of went with that long-winded response because I think it's really easy for, somebody like me or maybe even, somebody in middle management or at the director level or something to sit there and think, man, it must be nice to be at that level, just getting a fancy trip to France and seeing,
Yeah.
like you said, all the cringy rosé and everything on TikTok and Instagram. But, being able to put that spin on it that you did, I think is super important. And honestly, like for any situation, being able to, take the good, take the learning takeaways and just kind of not worry about the rest. Don't let it, piss you off or, ruin the event for
Yeah.
you or whatever you may be doing, whether it's a role or anything else. But just taking the good out of any situation you're in is super cool. And I think, yeah, that is such a super important point of like, we probably do on a consistent basis need to be, judging human creativity and really, coming together to figure out how we can continue to grow it and, where does it kind of go from here? Because, like you said, just with the rapid rise of AI and just everything, how the client agency relationship has changed over the past years, there's going to be some crazy expectations in the coming years. And events like that, I think, are, kind of where you're setting the standard and seeing, where can we go? How can we get some new ideas to be the people getting judged at the highest level when maybe you don't win something? So super
Yeah.
cool take. And, I love hearing that perspective compared to, maybe the more common one that you see on LinkedIn, either, saying there's huge fear of missing out or that they absolutely hate it and would never go back is the main thing I've been seeing on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's like, all those things there's truth to them, but the value is still there in coming together with people who are in this crazy industry along with us.
100%. I think your take too just like goes to really like reinstate, the opportunity for the young professionals in the industry is like, rather than looking at the negative of my job might get automated away or an AI agent could be doing what I'm doing later. It's like you should honestly look at that as almost a positive. I mean, there's going to be situations where people get laid off, lose their jobs. It's going to be negative, whatever. But, if you're in a position where, you can share some creative ideas or share those strategic ideas, it's only going to give you more capacity to really lean into that. And from everything I'm hearing from you, Avin, it sounds like, those ideas and strategic insights and new things coming from young people are what the older generation of marketers and advertisers want to see. And maybe, with all the crazy busyness of the entry level roles, that could be something we could start to see in the coming years is that opportunity to start to pop up more to, really, really help move the needle and provide value as a young professional rather than, just living in Excel sheets and, doing the random
Hmm.
one-off tasks that your manager might not want to be doing. So super cool perspective. That kind of wraps all I had for you for as far as like long form questions. We'll get into the last segment of the show here, which is my favorite segment. I do it for every show, just called the rapid fire value segment, where we'll run through a couple serious questions, a couple fun ones, and just get some off the top of your head takes that try to provide some, really good actionable insights and advice for the students and young professionals watching. So
All
right now to
right.
kind of start, we'll start on the more serious note. What would you say right now for students, young professionals? What is the best free or low cost tool that would be worth upskilling in?
Uh, I want to make sure I'm putting my company hat on, knowing we've got big enterprise deal with Microsoft. But if I wasn't here, I would say leverage everything that Google has to offer, not just Gemini, but Google Classes, coursework. As Google tends to do, they're really good at inventing things. They're not always good at communicating to everybody that they exist. So go explore. They have so many free classes, not just in AI, but in technology, in marketing. Go read Think with Google from their marketing team. Tons of great insights, tons of great value. Google is such a prolific marketer and spender, and they have so much that is just out there and free and all available for you to use. So as a student, it is one of the best ways to really get smart on, obviously young folks are more fluent in AI than any of us, but if there's any uncertainty or doubt about your skills coming out of school, go take all the free classes, learn everything you can about Gemini, learn everything you can about everything Google's doing, because they're also good at sharing their, not just their success, but where they've tried things and they failed. They're really good about being vulnerable with their inventions, their approaches, and saying, we tried this, didn't work, here's what we learned for it. So make the most out of all of it, and most of it is free out there.
No, that's great advice. I know as a student, I was thinking like the Google Ads certification was really the only one out there, but once you start to dive in, it's pretty crazy how much
Hmm.
resources and just all the different areas of technology, marketing, sales that Google touches and is able to provide learnings on. So,
Yep.
super great advice. Now to kind of go to a little more fun one. I love asking this to my Detroit guests and also my New York guests because it's pretty big culture, and that is pizza. Where in New York would you say is the number one spot to grab a slice?
Pizza, Joe's, hands down.
Joe's?
Joe's
Okay.
is one of the original icons. Yeah, I still miss it. I moved to New Jersey. I did the suburban thing about 5 years ago, but I still dream of Joe's.
That's crazy. It must be so good. I'm yet to go to New York City as like an adult, so that's definitely one of the
Oh,
first stops on my list.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta do it. Gotta do.
Have you been to Detroit?
A little bit. Spent more time in Birmingham recently, but I've been in and out of Detroit a little. So same thing. If you have any good Detroit recommendations, especially Detroit pizza, I will
Definitely
take
check
a
out
mix of them
Buddies.
there.
Most
Buddies.
of
All
the
right.
Detroit marketers I talk to, yeah, Buddies is the go-to in Detroit. So definitely
All
check
right.
it out.
There you go.
Yeah, it's funny growing up, I never knew Detroit style pizza even existed, but apparently it's a pretty big deal. So
Yeah, for sure.
sweet. So to kind of go back to a little bit more of the serious side, we talked about a lot of the soft skills. You said as somebody that's looking to hire a young strategist, here's what I'm looking for as far as being curious, bringing new ideas to the table, being brave. What would you say are the one or two hard skills though that you would really love to see a young strategist kind of be proficient in?
I think the two that I would say, especially so, and they're going to be on kind of different sides of the spectrum. One, especially in a world that increasingly feels like you can't make a decision without data, you can't make a decision without technology, you can't do these. The power of storytelling is one of those things that is at risk of getting lost. But when you really see it, when you see someone, it doesn't mean that you need to be, the next great American novelist, but the ability to write clearly, to tell a story simply, to succinctly bring across a lot of disparate points, distill that down into here's what I think this is actually saying, and bring people along on that journey is such a powerful skill, which is why I think I saw something a few months ago, which is the rise of storyteller in job descriptions or in titles has exploded in the last couple of years because it is a rare skill to find somebody who can take mountains of data, mountains of evidence, mountains of opinions, turn that into a compelling story. So practice your writing. Doesn't mean you need to be a writer, doesn't mean you need to be the great poet of your generation, but practice writing, get the reps in, tell your stories, be the person that can really communicate clearly, and that will set you apart from so many others because storytelling matters. Oftentimes, this is a cliche, but clients don't remember the slide, they don't remember the data point as much as we all sweat and obsess over it. They remember the story you told in the room. Did you leave a lasting impression? Do they remember that story? Did they buy that story? So that's kind of hard skill number one. The other skill that I would suggest, and this is on the opposite end of the spectrum, um, don't discount your math classes. Don't discount the quant side of all this. Like as somebody who spent my first 10 years on the creative side, it is sexier. It's more exciting. Ideas, creativity, all of those things. But when you get into the boardroom, when you're pitching ideas to not just the CMO, but increasingly you need to convince the CEO, you need to convince the CFO. They don't often speak the language of ideas. They speak the language of math and outcomes, And one of the things where I'm grateful that I made the turn that I did and really built up the media side of my knowledge and skills is because when you can talk to a CFO in the language of what he's staring or he or she is staring at every day, when they're looking at money in and money out, profit and loss, when they're looking at how do I hit these targets? How do I make sure that I'm keeping the street happy? The ability to back your ideas and your creativity with the analytical underpinnings and the rigor and the evidence of being able to fluently speak the language of finance, of profit and loss. Those two things are essential. So, and it's a rare combination of skills to be able to tell a story, to capture dreams, to make people feel something, but then also get them to see the evidence, the logic, the rigor that went into that. You can do that. If you can do those two things well, you will be a pretty unstoppable force in whatever you do. It doesn't just need to be advertising, but whatever you go into, the power of stories and the power of evidence and math and rigor behind it, that'll take you places.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a toolkit for success in advertising. I've definitely, being on the media side, on the performance side, I see the value in having, that math
Yeah.
skill, that the being able to just look at crazy Excel sheets of data and start to make sense of them. But, just like you said in the first hard skill though, if you can't take it and craft it into a story that makes sense for the person listening, whether it be the client person that you're talking to, the client person's boss, who, like you said, is only worried about money in and money out. You got to be able to convey that message, and that is just some great advice and some stuff that you can just go and work on at home. Find some case studies or find some stuff online and literally just practice. Look at some data and try to come up with some stories. Share your
Absolutely.
opinions on LinkedIn. Avin's literally giving you the recipe. Even earlier in the episode, so many things you can take this advice now and just build on it and continue to move yourself forward. So now to kind of switch back, and the Detroit auto scene is huge. Obviously, I work in it, and a lot of Detroit advertisers, it's where they find themselves. So I always like to ask,
Mhm.
when you started out in advertising, what were you driving, and what did that lead to now? What are you driving now?
That's a really good question. My first, what was I driving? I had a Nissan Maxima when I was in my 20s, which, after I moved to New York, obviously sold, didn't have a car for a long time. And now I don't know if this is an unpopular take, but we drive a Tesla. So you probably can't paint a direct line there, but I'm a full-on EV convert. That's kind of it's hard to imagine a world going back, but that's where I am now.
No, that's so cool. And like, especially, do you drive to New York very often, or are you primarily just staying in Jersey?
I'm a train and commuter guy, so we don't drive a ton. Sometimes when we come in with the kids, we'll drive in, but yeah, that's been an adjustment. I didn't have a car for almost 15 years, and then moved to the suburbs, did the whole thing. I guess I have to care about my lawn and stuff now, and get a car and all that. So, but here we are.
Yeah, I know. I totally get that. Just going from the apartment life at MSU to now having my own
Yeah,
place and taking care of the yard and everything like that. It's like, oh my God, why can't I just call maintenance? But that's
yeah,
how it
right.
goes.
Exactly.
Sweet. So, as far as rapid fire value, I got a couple more here for you. Um, right now, I know everybody who's watching this really should definitely reach out and connect with you on LinkedIn. I know you share some
Absolutely.
stuff there, and just I recommend to anybody listening, all my guests, they come on because they want to help us. They want to spend an hour chatting with me about helping us. Connect with them on LinkedIn and reach out. I mean, it's common sense in my opinion, so please do it. But who else would you say are, 2 to 3 people that you recommend all students and young professionals to maybe, follow or connect with on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. Probably, well, I imagine they're probably pretty popular among a lot of young folks and students, but breaking and entering media, Gino Schellenberg and Jack Westerkamp, similar to you, Braxton, they saw an opportunity, something that wasn't being done in the industry, and they just went after it. So the intelligence, the insight, and let's be honest, the entertainment of what they do is just such a valuable and necessary thing. Sometimes we can take this industry really seriously, and it's not that it's not serious. We're in important jobs to help our clients, but we also, especially those of us who are older, we got into this because it's fun and we can wear jeans to work and all that. So they're bringing a levity and a fun back to this industry in a time when it felt too serious, too heavy, everything felt hard. And so I just love what they're doing. So if you're not following them yet, Breaking and Entering is, a great highlight of the day. 60 seconds of advertising news that just kind of gives you what you need to know. So that would be one. On a more, another note, Zoe Scammon is I hate the word thought leader, but former advertising strategy leader, has gone off on her own, founded the Bodacious Strategy Studio. Just a really prolific and compelling thinker, always putting out new pieces of either frameworks or ways she's thinking about things, puts a lot of it out there for free in a very generous spirit that just helps other people learn. So if you're an aspiring strategist, Zoe Scammon is another great one to look for. On the other side of the house, Allie Miller is an AI leader. I actually happened to work with her when she was an intern back in the day at Arnold, and has now gone out through Amazon, through big AI organizations, and is somebody who demystifies the technology and talks about it like a human in a way to actually help people understand what's really valuable about it, what the opportunity is. So somebody who has taken this not as somebody to just like scare you about the potential, but actually make it real and useful and relatable. Um, who else? Rob Mayhew, back to the entertainment side. Rob Mayhew is a creative director. And for folks like me who've been doing this for a while, he just is a great comedian and puts out a lot of content that shows younger people what this business used to be like, the kinds of crazy things that we used to get into. And he's just a funny guy to follow. And the last one that I would suggest is George Tenenbaum, who I worked with, is a legendary creative. Has just done everything there is to do. I met him when I was at RGA, and now he's one of those old heads who just shares kind of the simple. He's almost like my David Ogilvy at this point. He's a guy that I actually know who shares the simple tools of the trade of what does writing great copy really look like. What does an idea really look like? How do you know brilliance when you find it? As a leader or as a creative or as a strategist. And so every time I see him post anything, he's just somebody I'm like, oh, that is an excellent piece of advice that I'll take into my next review or into my next meeting or into my next client interaction. So kind of runs the spectrum from funny and lighthearted to serious and things that I actually get a lot of use out of. But those are my top, I think I said four or five.
No, I love that. And yeah, I'm glad you provided a few extras because there's, never enough connections to
Oh
have on
yeah, I
LinkedIn
broke
and
the rule.
enough.
Sorry, you asked for you
No,
asked for
you're
two,
good. No,
and I gave you
it's
five.
as many perspectives is the best thing I think, and especially with people who are putting out content, especially like you said, in a generous spirit and are just giving the stuff away. It's like the main thing stopping you from getting it is just not knowing about them. So putting those
Yeah.
names out there and making it available to students, young professionals, I think is so valuable. And I'm also so happy you brought up breaking and entering media because finding their podcast and starting to really like their content is really what
Hmm.
inspired me to start this show. I found them right around when I was graduating and following them
Yeah.
along and everything. And I kind of came upon this idea of there's not enough people like me that are just interviewing, the people who are killing it in the field right now and providing those insights just because I got a
Totally.
lot of good insights in college by doing that, just having like a 20-minute coffee chat. So I was like, let's scale this up. Let's, maybe take a page out of Breaking and Entering's book and, just dive all in on something that nobody's doing and see how it goes. And here we are. So I'm happy you brought that up and just also some of those other names I recognize, some great people to connect with. So definitely, like I said, connect with Avin and definitely connect with, everybody he just mentioned there. This is the last question I got for you, Avin. I know I've kept you a couple minutes over time, so I hope you're not missing anything crazy important. But
Yeah.
to keep it brief, if you could go back to sitting in my seat, that 20 to 22-year-old who's just breaking in, you're super motivated, you got all the fire in the world, but you're also crazy ignorant. You don't know what's going to hit you next. You don't know when that uppercut's going to hit and knock you off your high horse. What would you go back and tell yourself that 20 to 22-year-old version of Avin?
Um, the world needs your perspective. This industry needs your perspective. As hard as it can be at times, as much as you might tell yourself, I don't want to bother that person, they're too busy, or it's going to be, I'm one of a thousand. All of us are looking for that diamond in the rough, that person with the initiative, with the conviction, with the desire to do something different, to really change things. Your perspective is so critical, even if it doesn't always feel that way, even if you're seeing headlines that a robot can do your job and these jobs won't exist. Just remember that what all of your background, all of your perspective, everything that makes you you, not just where you went to school, not just the hard skills, but your perspective, your curiosity, your point of view, that matters in this world. And we need it. We need it more than ever as this industry is changing.
Yeah, that is such a great reminder, and I think such a great note to end off on with, how much we talked about AI tools, everything like that.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, your perspective is so important, and as an advertiser and marketer, you got to find ways to bring it to the table. So that is some great advice, Avin. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for carving out the time to do this. I know once you
absolutely.
get up to this level in the hold codes, it's pretty crazy. So it was super awesome getting to chat with you in this, kind of long form segment. But yeah, I would say, connect with Avin on LinkedIn. Anything else you'd like to plug or, kind of round out on?
No, reach out. Like I said to Broxton at the top of this, nothing makes me happier than taking time to meet that next generation and to speak with young people looking to get into this. So reach out, let's talk. And Broxton, thank you for having me on. This was great.
Definitely, yes. Thank you, Avin, and you have a great rest of your night.